Preparing for a project management at Wells Fargo interview? You've reached Candy Mentor, and this video is for you. We'll walk through 20 key questions you're likely to face. For each question you'll see a sample answer followed by the key points to cover. Subscribe, like, and share, and drop a topic request in the comments. Question 1. How do you manage a complex project from initiation through closure? I manage projects by connecting business outcomes, scope, schedule, budget, risks, and quality. At kickoff, I confirm success metrics, decision rights, dependencies, and governance. I build an integrated plan, establish reporting cadence, and track milestones through measurable indicators. When conditions change, I assess impact, present options, and secure documented approval. In a regulated banking environment, I also protect auditability, customer impact, and control requirements rather than treating delivery speed as the only objective. While answering, cover business outcomes, scope, schedule, budget, risks, governance, stakeholder alignment, measurable success criteria, change control, documentation, and lessons learned in a regulated banking environment. Question 2. Why do you want to work as a project manager at Wells Fargo? Wells Fargo appeals to me because project management here combines meaningful customer impact with operational and regulatory discipline. Large banking initiatives require strong coordination across technology, risk, compliance, operations, and business teams. My strength is translating strategy into executable plans while maintaining transparency, accountability, and control awareness. I also value environments where ethical decisions matter. I would bring structured execution, calm stakeholder leadership, and a continuous improvement mindset to initiatives that strengthen customer experience and enterprise resilience. Make sure to cover Wells Fargo's scale, customer trust, regulatory responsibility, transformation priorities, collaboration across business and technology, and how your experience supports disciplined, ethical, outcome-focused delivery. Question 3. Tell me about a project that was delivered under significant regulatory or compliance constraints. I led a customer data reporting project subject to strict access, retention, and validation controls. I involved compliance and information security during planning, mapped requirements to deliverables, and assigned owners for every control. We used gated testing, approval records, and evidence repositories so audit questions could be answered quickly. A late control gap threatened the deadline, so I escalated it with options, secured a phased release decision, and completed remediation without weakening the required control environment. In your answer, discuss applicable regulations, control mapping, compliance partners, evidence collection, testing, issue remediation, audit readiness, escalation practices, and how you balanced mandatory controls with delivery timelines. Question 4. How do you identify, assess, and manage risks on a large banking project? Risk management is a continuous decision process, not a spreadsheet exercise. I begin with workshops, historical data, assumptions, dependencies, and control reviews, then score risks by probability and impact. Each material risk receives an accountable owner, mitigation actions, trigger conditions, and a contingency plan. I review the register in governance meetings, track residual exposure, and escalate when thresholds are exceeded. This approach helps leaders act early instead of discovering surprises during implementation or audit. Be sure to mention a risk register, probability impact scoring, risk owners, mitigation and contingency plans, trigger indicators, residual risk, escalation thresholds, and regular review with business, technology, and control stakeholders. Question 5. Describe a time you had to manage conflicting priorities among senior stakeholders. On one program, operations wanted faster automation while risk requested additional validation and technology needed capacity for a security upgrade. I met each leader separately, clarified the underlying outcomes, and quantified customer, regulatory, cost, and schedule impacts. I presented sequencing options rather than choosing sides. The steering committee approved a controlled pilot, followed by validation and broader rollout. Because the decision criteria were transparent and documented, stakeholders supported the outcome even when their preferred timing changed. Focus on listening to competing objectives, establishing decision criteria, quantifying customer and risk impact, presenting trade-offs, using governance, documenting decisions, and maintaining relationships after the final prioritization. Question 6. How would you handle a project that is falling behind schedule? I first determine whether the delay comes from scope growth, estimates, dependencies, resources, defects, or decisions. I review the critical path and distinguish recoverable work from milestones that genuinely require replanning. Then I develop options such as resequencing, adding capacity, reducing non-essential scope, or phasing delivery. I communicate the impact early, recommend a realistic path, and obtain approval for any baseline change. I never hide schedule pressure by compressing testing or bypassing required controls. In your answer, cover root cause analysis, critical path review, dependency validation, resource constraints, recovery options, scope trade-offs, transparent communication, rebaselining, and protecting quality and control commitments. Question 7. What project management methodology do you prefer, and how do you choose between Agile, Waterfall, and hybrid delivery? I choose the method based on uncertainty, risk, dependency structure, and the type of value being delivered. Waterfall can suit fixed regulatory requirements, vendor implementations, or infrastructure changes with defined interfaces. Agile works well when customer needs and solutions evolve, provided controls remain visible. For many banking programs, I use a hybrid model: stage gates for funding, architecture, risk, and release approval, with iterative delivery inside each stage. The methodology should serve outcomes, not become the outcome. Mention regulatory certainty, requirements volatility, delivery complexity, dependencies, incremental value, governance needs, team maturity, hybrid stage gates, and tailoring rather than applying a methodology mechanically. Question 8. How do you communicate project status to executives and project teams? I use one source of truth but tailor the message to the audience. Executives receive a concise view of outcomes, milestone health, budget, top risks, decisions needed, and trend direction. Delivery teams need actionable detail about dependencies, owners, and near-term commitments. I define status criteria upfront so green, amber, and red means something consistent. If performance is deteriorating, I state the cause, impact, and recommendation directly. Clear reporting builds trust because it enables decisions rather than merely describing activity. Discuss audience-specific reporting, concise dashboards, milestone health, budget, risks, issues, decisions needed, dependencies, trend indicators, consistent definitions, and escalation without unnecessary detail or surprises. Question 9. Tell me about a time you managed a difficult stakeholder or resistant team member. A senior operations partner repeatedly challenged the project in meetings and delayed approvals. Instead of labeling the behavior, I scheduled a private discussion and learned that prior initiatives had created manual work and weak support after launch. I incorporated those concerns into acceptance criteria, added an operational readiness checkpoint, and clarified approval dates and consequences. The relationship improved because the stakeholder saw a practical response. I continued documenting commitments and escalated only when agreed actions were missed. Be sure to cover empathy, active listening, underlying concerns, shared objectives, facts, private conversation, agreed actions, escalation boundaries, and how you preserved collaboration while holding people accountable. Question 10. How do you control scope creep while keeping stakeholders engaged? I treat scope changes as decisions, not informal promises. I maintain a requirements baseline and trace each item to a business objective, risk, or obligation. When a new request arrives, I assess cost, schedule, capacity, dependencies, control impact, and expected benefit. I then offer choices: defer it, swap it with lower value work, fund additional capacity, or approve a new baseline. Stakeholders remain engaged because requests are evaluated transparently, and valuable ideas are captured instead of dismissed. In your answer, explain baseline scope, traceability to objectives, intake criteria, impact analysis, prioritization, change authority, benefits, dependency effects, and respectful communication when requests cannot fit the current release. Question 11. Describe your approach to managing budgets, forecasts, and financial performance. I establish the cost baseline by workstream, resource type, vendor commitment, and milestone. During execution, I compare actual and committed spend with planned value, investigate variances, and update the estimate at completion using current evidence. I separate one-time costs from ongoing operational impact and make assumptions explicit. If the forecast moves materially, I present corrective options such as reprioritization, sequencing, or funding approval. Financial control is strongest when forecasts are updated early rather than defended after overruns occur. Focus on approved baseline, actuals, committed spend, estimate at completion, variance analysis, resource and vendor costs, forecast assumptions, corrective action, approvals, and clear financial reporting. Question 12. How do you manage third-party vendors on a critical project? I manage vendors through clear outcomes, measurable acceptance criteria, contractual milestones, and disciplined governance. Before execution, I confirm security, resilience, privacy, compliance, and data handling requirements with the relevant control partners. During delivery, I track performance against schedule, quality, defects, dependencies, and service levels. I hold regular reviews, document actions, and escalate through the contract when necessary. For critical suppliers, I also maintain contingency options, because vendor dependency is both a delivery risk and a business resilience concern. Mention due diligence, contractual deliverables, service levels, milestones, security and compliance reviews, dependencies, performance metrics, issue escalation, acceptance criteria, and contingency planning for vendor failure. Question 13. How do you ensure a project is ready for implementation and successful transition to operations? Implementation readiness means the organization can operate safely after the project team leaves. I use a checklist covering functional and control testing, data reconciliation, defects, training, communications, support coverage, runbooks, monitoring, rollback, and business acceptance. Each item has an owner and evidence, not just a verbal status. I schedule a formal go or no-go review with accountable leaders, then provide hypercare with defined exit criteria. Finally, I transfer ownership and measure adoption, stability, and realized benefits. Cover readiness criteria, testing, defect thresholds, training, support model, runbooks, data migration, communications, rollback, business sign-off, hypercare, monitoring, and post-implementation ownership. Question 14. Tell me about a project failure or major mistake and what you learned. On an earlier project, I underestimated the effort required for data cleansing because business owners assumed source data was already standardized. Integration testing exposed numerous exceptions and delayed the pilot. I took responsibility, stopped expanding scope, and led a focused profiling and remediation plan with data owners. We reset the forecast and added data quality assessment to future discovery phases. The lesson was simple: validate critical assumptions with evidence early, especially when migration risk can undermine an otherwise sound solution. Be honest about your accountability, explain the business impact, identify root causes rather than blame, describe corrective actions, show measurable learning, and connect the lesson to improved planning or governance. Question 15. How do you measure whether a project has delivered its intended benefits? I define benefits before delivery begins, including a baseline, target, measurement method, owner, and review date. Depending on the initiative, indicators might include adoption, processing time, error rates, customer satisfaction, operational cost, control exceptions, or loss avoidance. I distinguish delivery outputs from business outcomes. Launching a capability does not prove value. After implementation, I schedule benefits reviews with the business owner and address adoption gaps. This keeps the project focused on measurable improvement rather than completing tasks. Discuss benefits hypotheses, baseline metrics, leading and lagging indicators, adoption, customer outcomes, operational efficiency, risk reduction, ownership, measurement timing, and benefits realization after formal project closure. Question 16. How do you lead cross-functional teams when you do not have direct authority? I lead through clarity, credibility, and consistent follow-through rather than hierarchy. I align the team on the customer or business outcome, clarify roles using a responsibility matrix, and make dependencies visible. I listen to functional constraints, negotiate realistic commitments, and remove obstacles quickly. Progress reviews focus on facts and decisions, not blame. When commitments remain unresolved, I use the agreed escalation path with evidence. People usually engage when they understand the purpose, their authority, and how their work affects the whole outcome. In your answer, emphasize shared outcomes, role clarity, influence, trust, stakeholder mapping, dependable follow-through, conflict resolution, escalation paths, recognition, and accountability through agreed commitments. Question 17. How would you manage data privacy, cybersecurity, and information security risks in a project? I involve security and privacy specialists during discovery, not at the final approval stage. First, I identify data classification, users, interfaces, third parties, retention, and regulatory obligations. The plan then includes least privilege access, encryption, secure configuration, threat assessment, vulnerability testing, monitoring, and evidence collection. I track security findings like any other critical issue, with owners and deadlines. If a residual risk remains, the accountable authority must explicitly accept it. This prevents security from becoming a late-stage surprise. Mention data classification, least privilege, secure design, threat assessment, encryption, access reviews, vendor controls, privacy requirements, testing, incident response, evidence, and early partnership with security experts. Question 18. How do you handle project dependencies across multiple programs and business units? I maintain a dependency map that identifies the provider, receiver, deliverable, required date, acceptance condition, and consequence of delay. I validate those dependencies with the owners rather than relying on assumptions, then link them to the integrated schedule and critical path. Cross-program reviews address conflicts early, while escalation thresholds prevent silent slippage. For high-impact dependencies, I create alternatives such as mocks, phased interfaces, temporary manual processing, or resequenced work. Visibility turns dependency risk into a manageable decision. Focus on dependency mapping, accountable owners, interface agreements, integrated milestones, assumptions, critical path analysis, early warning indicators, cross-program governance, and contingency plans for delayed upstream or downstream work. Question 19. What would you do if a business leader asked you to bypass a required control to meet a deadline? I would not bypass a required control or conceal the request. I would clarify the business urgency, explain the potential customer, regulatory, operational, and reputational consequences, and involve the control owner immediately. Then I would propose compliant alternatives, such as reducing scope, using a controlled pilot, changing sequence, or obtaining formal risk acceptance from the authorized decision-maker. I would document the decision and rationale. Protecting trust and control integrity is part of delivery, not an obstacle separate from it. Be sure to address ethical judgment, policy adherence, customer and regulatory risk, respectful challenge, documented escalation, alternative options, accountable risk acceptance, and the principle that deadlines never justify unauthorized control bypasses. Question 20. How do you use lessons learned and continuous improvement across projects? I make lessons learned useful by connecting them to evidence and an owner. After major milestones, I conduct a blameless review covering outcomes, decisions, defects, risks, communication, and controls. We identify recurring causes, prioritize a small number of actions, and assign due dates. Improvements might include better estimation templates, earlier control reviews, clearer acceptance criteria, or stronger vendor checkpoints. I store the results where teams can find them, then verify adoption through subsequent project metrics and governance reviews. Discuss blameless retrospectives, evidence-based analysis, recurring themes, action ownership, process changes, knowledge repositories, metrics, governance improvements, and verifying that lessons are applied on subsequent initiatives. If you are still with us, congratulations! You are much ahead of the rest and serious about preparing for your interview. We hope we were able to add value to your preparation and create some helpful content. Do not forget to like and share this video. Your small act can do great things for us.